Now, from somewhere in beautiful downtown Burbank, NBC once more tries to prevent...
What happens when two bass road warriors spend quality time talking music and life with one of their peers? Bassist, educator, author David C. Gross and bassist and head honcho of KnowYourBassPlayer.com, Tom Semioli, trade dates with the legends of rock, jazz, funk, blues, folk, country, and more. Notes from an Artist, revealing conversations with the legends who've created the soundtrack of our lives. What happens? You're about to find out. It's another episode of Notes from an Artist.
Here's the tragedy. Dear Fran, for 3 years, a man and I were pen pals. Real friends. But when we met, he turned away. Now, I'm not bad-looking, Fran. What's wrong? Oh, dearie. How about Lavoris? Has a real refreshing mouth purifier. And love, Lavoris is the mouthwash dentists use most. Use Lavoris every day, honey. Next time you see him, he won't turn away, honest.
Nothing upsets a pickle lover more than a dull, soggy pickle. Pickle lovers always insist on the proud pickle. Heinz. No compromise, no shortcuts, no soggy pickle. Heinz stops at nothing to give you a pickle that tastes the way no other pickle does. Crisp, full-bodied, savory. That's what makes Heinz the proud pickle. If you were the best-tasting pickle, wouldn't you be proud?
David, we welcome our listener back to another contusion of Notes from an Artist.
A contusion?
Yes, I am your DEI host, Tom Semioli. My co-host is America's favorite podcast and radio personality. Now, you know I am not under oath here. That is David C. Gross. David, please greet our listener.
Hey, Karen, how are things? Things. I think we're more a conflagration than a contusion.
We don't want any configurations here. David, tonight our guest is a bona fide legend in the endeavor that is or once was music journalism. And I am talking about Dan Ouellette. We are here to discuss his latest book, which actually came out in 2024, The Landfill Chronicles, Unearthing Legends of Modern Music. And since we explained the title of the book and who Dan is at the beginning of the show, there is no need to repeat those sordid details. There is no need to repeat those sordid details. There is no need to repeat those sordid details.
I repeat myself when under stress. 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 I repeat...
But it was a big thrill for me to speak with Dan. I've been reading his work for over 40 years. I love the fact that he put out a collection of interviews that have been lost in the digital age. And some of them are even unpublished in an era when blogs did not exist. So not everything got published in those days. And as print gives way to X's and O's, we are losing an incalculable amount of valuable information, which is where Dan's work comes in. He's a masterful writer. It's a joy to read his interviews, his reviews, his op-eds, and it's an important part of our history. It explains to future generations, if there are going to be future generations, who we were, who we are, and what we were thinking about, and how these artists affected us. This is real history. This is not an AI version of history. Dan was there, and we're seeing a lot of AI revised history, but it's good to get it from Dan, who, like I said, had his boots on the ground. And what do you have to say about Dan, David, before we drag him in, kicking and screaming?
One of the things that I thought this interview sparked in my memory was I went back into my archives. And since I had moved into a new house, most of my archives were still in boxes. And it's amazing to think all the years of magazine writing that I have done is not online. So my Landfill Chronicles are just as full, and maybe mine belong in a landfill. I don't know. But it was nice to go back to that stuff, and it really did strike a chord with me regarding this new AI and the digitizing of everything, because there is no digitizing of everything. It's just what's already been digitized, frankly. I mean, I find that really kind of complex when you think, oh, they're digitizing everything. No, they're not. They're only digitizing what's already been put on, let's say, Microsoft Word or Pages or something. There's no previous digitation. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea that he did this, and the artists are great. This new version that he's in the process of doing is going to be even better.
Exactly. You know, it's again, I'm sort of a YouTube junkie, and I go on all these YouTube channels, and I'm seeing the same history that Dan talks about in his book, rendered by AI. And not only is AI doing the voiceovers and the script writing, but AI is also compiling the video clips, obviously, since YouTube is a video channel. But it's getting more and more frightening. And for those of us who were there, we can recognize the errors in AI. Well, that's not quite how it happened. That's not really what went down. But for future generations that are doing research or just curious about that time, they're going to be subject to misinformation. So
correct. Well, remember when a couple of weeks ago, one of my books came out as an audiobook through Amazon, and Bassists of Notes was pronounced Bassists of Notes. So I guess it's a bunch of dogs playing instruments, because it's Bassets of Notes.
Yes, Bassets.
Yeah, I think to make it personal was kind of funny in its own way. I laughed more than cried, but at this point, I don't want to be a curmudgeonly old, well, it used to be this, it used to be that. But however, it used to be this and it used to be that. So what do you say?
Again, it's all about accuracy. It's not about being an old grouch and saying, well, I liked it the old way. I like print media. I like holding media in my hands. You're a big Kindle guy, so you don't mind electronic media. I like Kindle. I just have problem hooking the damn thing up, so I go back to the printed word on paper.
I like the Kindle app, Tom. It's a different thing. I don't even use a Kindle. However, I have one because if I ever go to the beach, this one you can read with the sun out. So on my phone or on my iPad, the Apple app of Kindle does not work that way. However, it's a lot easier being on a grocery line at a grocery store, and instead of listening to all the nonsense that's going on, just put on the app and read.
Exactly. And you can also tuck the Kindle into your Speedo on the beach, which is very...
Well, that's true. That's true. I could pretty well tuck most anything into that Speedo. Yeah.
Lots of room in David's Speedo. But first, before we get to Dan Ouellette, who has just left the building, David, I think he jumped out the window. Let us get to the plugs. David, did you know when the sun goes down and the crow flies on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, you can hear Notes from an Artist on Cygnus Internet Radio, which was not invented by Elon Musk, nor was it invented by Al Gore. It was invented by Rick Allison. www.cygnusradio.com on the browser of your choice. Now, David, you can hear this podcast anytime you like, even when you're wearing your Speedo, on the beach, on Apple, Amazon, Buzzsprout, Spotify, and wherever podcasts are podulated. David, you may...
That hurts, actually.
It hurts, yes. It's a little abrasive on the Speedo. You may ask yourself who's listening. And you may find yourself living in a shotgun shack. And you may find yourself in another part of the world. And you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile. And you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife and a beautiful mortgage.
What's beautiful about that, Morty?
Yes, and you may ask yourself, why did I get here? Did you know, David, that Notes from an Artist podcast is in the top 10 percentile of all 3.2 million registered podcasts?
You know what my Jewish grandmother would say? You're only in the top 10%?
Yeah, exactly. Why aren't you number one? Well, we're in the top 3.2 million podcasts known to men and women and whatever other genders are in vogue at the moment. And Notes from an Artist podcast is heard in 110 countries and territories and over 2,005 cities.
2005?
That's all there is. And our YouTube page is called Notes from an Artist. Oddly enough, it has over 100 videos of some of our past guests. None of our future guests have yet to appear on Notes from an Artist YouTube. And if you troll the internet, David, and I know you do, troll on over to www.notesfromanartist.com to see what we're up to. And I have to do that because I have no idea what we're doing. We will have a Dan Ouellette playlist following the show, and we will discuss that. But let us bring in the man of the hour, Dan Ouellette.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Welcome to the
good.
show, Dan. Great to have you.
Hey, thank you very much for asking me.
All right. I've been reading you for years. Dan, I need to know this. I've been wondering about this for the last 40 years. How is your last name pronounced?
Okay. Well, it comes from my grandfather was from Quebec, right?
Okay.
So he's French. It's kind of like, how do you say yes in French? You know?
Oui.
Yeah.
So it's
So,
written-
and it's spelled O-U-I, right?
Right.
So my name is not Ouelette, but it's Ouellette. It's like pronounced like a W.
All right. Let me write that down symphonically, David. So it's pronounced Ouellette.
we hire the handicap, which is why Tom is part of the show. I usually have to spell everything out to him with phonics, so it's
Symphonics, yes.
it's just the way it is.
So if your child's struggling or starting out in reading, Hooked on Phonics may be an answer. Remember, good phonics skills can make a difference.
I'm from the Norm Crosby School of Journalism.
How about Christopher Columbus? Was not ashamed to go to a woman and ask her for help in ships and a couple dollars for himself. And this was a brave man, one of the bravest men in all history. Fearless. Christopher Columbus did not know the meaning of the word fear. He didn't know the meaning of the word quit. He didn't know a lot of words. He couldn't talk English.
So anyway, David, let us introduce Dan Ouellette to our show.
Thank you. Thank you. That's good.
That's good. I pronounced his name right. Big
Okay,
controversy here. Dan, you're my neighbor. You live in East Harlem, yes?
I used to.
Okay.
At the pandemic, my wife and I moved. We had bought a house back in 2003, just as a place to get away from the craziness of New York. And so we ended up giving up our apartment on East 126 and moving back out to our house to kind of like wait things out during the pandemic. Fully intending to move back to New York when we guessed that the rents would be lower. Well, we've never been able to get a footprint back in New York. So I live on Shelter Island.
Oh, okay.
You know that?
You lived across the street from the famous Great Day in Harlem photograph.
Yes, I did.
Wow. Incredible.
I used to go to the ice cream store in Greenpoint before getting the ferry over to Shelter Island.
Uh-huh. There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, so David, we usually compose an introduction for our guests, but Dan Ouellette at danouellette.net, notice how that rolls off the tongue, he does such a good job at describing himself that I guess I'll read from his bio, and I guess you hired a writer to do this, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely not. No, I do all my own writing.
Right, no chat
Yes,
GPT.
Read it out.
All right, well, here's what Dan Ouellette has to say about Dan Ouellette. He is a New York-based writer. He's an author. He's a journalist. He's an editor. He's a curator. He's a speaker with an expertise in jazz music as well as beyond jazz music, which includes significant archival interviews with Frank Zappa, Lou Reed, Elvis Costello, John Lee Hooker, David Byrne, Alison Krauss, T-Bone Burnett, Joni Mitchell, and others. And Dan travels the world covering music. Nice work if you can get it.
Well, they pay my ticket and give me a hotel. I'll go anyplace.
Dave, Dan's explorations include Beijing, Cape Town, South Africa, Melbourne, Mali, Istanbul, Canada. David, isn't Canada the newest state we have now?
That's right. It's the 51st state.
And the Mississippi Delta juke joints. What do you describe, Dan? What is a juke joint? Is it a place where there's jukeboxes, or is Southside Johnny there? What is a juke joint?
No. Juke joints goes all the way back to blues music and like shacks.
Okay.
And so they were places where people would show up and play or perform or whatever. And they were always kind of old houses that were kind of sinking. And for POV magazine, I was asked to go to the Mississippi Delta and visit a whole bunch of juke joints. And that was kind of like a real thrill. I went to a whole bunch of them. I was probably the only white guy there. And people were so embracing of me coming there, and I wrote the piece for POV magazine.
How do you find juke joints? Because by their very nature, juke joints aren't listed anywhere.
Well, I started off in Clarksdale, which is like kind of like the home of the blues. It's much expanded since the time I was there, when it was just like a little jazz museum that was kind of funky. And I started asking people. I said, "So, there any juke joints? Are there any showrooms around Clarksdale?" And they pointed me to this one place where there was a blues musician playing with his band. I walked in and I had to get a ticket, but the ticket was like $3 or $5, and it included a pint of whiskey. So I started, I just started talking to people, and one thing led to another. I think I went to like 4 or 5. One person told me this great place. It's every Tuesday night. This guy has a great jam. You should go out there. So I drove all the way out there, and it was nothing. There was nothing. There were no cars parked or anything. So I walked up to the house, and this old black guy comes out, kind of like, who's this guy doing? And I explained to him what I was doing. He goes, "Oh, no, we don't have a show tonight, but come on in, let me show you around." And it was like kind of like almost like kind of a barn setting. And he was so great. And then he pointed me in a couple other directions of where there were, these impromptu jam sessions. A lot of people partying, a lot of people drinking, but just really, really enjoying the music.
Wow. So it's word of mouth. Yeah. Now, David, there's more. Dan has served as a project manager, a co-producer of audio-video projects, including between show content at the Monterey Jazz Festival. He is a chronicle of artist conversations in front of a live audience. We've never worked we've done live audiences, David.
That's right. Okay. They leave after we get
They leave when we
leave after. Well, maybe in some of my cases leave in between.
We cleared many houses, Dan.
Yeah, we're good. If you want to start a evacuation company or a dispersal company, call us.
Yeah. Like I used to go for I think 14 or 15 years. Every summer I would go to the North Sea Jazz Festival, and part of it was doing a downbeat blindfold test, but also part of it was having jazz talks with different people who were playing there. Those ended up being really cool.
Yeah, I love the downbeat blindfold test, and we'll get to that later. What else, Dan? Sizable catalog of recorded interviews from 1985 to the present are being archived at the California State University in Monterey Bay. Congratulations, that's fabulous.
Yeah, that was kind of like passed on to me by a really good friend of mine who lived out in Monterey. I spent a lot of time out there. He's since passed away, but he kind of opened the door for me to, Dropbox my interviews. So they're there. I don't know who's reading them and stuff, but I have a lot of stuff in there, including all my Frank Zappa interviews and stuff like that. They're there.
Interesting. And you were nominated for the Lifetime Achievement Award in Jazz Journalism in 2019 by the Jazz Journalism Association. Did you get that award?
No. I was nominated a couple times. But, it's a Jazz Journalism Association. I've been a member on and off since its beginning. And there's a clique going on.
Yeah, I've heard about those things.
The big thing for me is that I came to New York in 1999, and I knew a lot of people in the jazz community, and I had work here too, you know. So moved from San Francisco, and in the jazz world, if you're from San Francisco, you're kind of like in the minor leagues.
Interesting.
And so I really pushed ahead, and I made a name for myself out in San Francisco. And I thought, well, this is going to be really easy. People are going to respect me in New York. Well, there are journalist wars going on, you know, and nevertheless, there you go.
Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that because I lived in San Francisco for about 5 years. I moved from Manhattan to San Francisco during the Dinkins administration. I got fed up with New York. So I lived in San Francisco from like 89 to 96.
Yeah.
And it was a real culture shock. What flew in New York did not fly in San Francisco. There's sort of a natural rivalry between those cities. And they had a great jazz. I used to go to Yoshi's in Oakland all the time. And the Fillmore opened up and they reopened, as it does many times, and they had jazz there. I found the music scene to be very, very fertile in San Francisco. And
at that time, there was a whole bunch of young jazz musicians. They were kind of centered around Peter Applebaum.
Okay.
He had his bands that were like big bands, and he got the attention of Don Cherry, who joined the band for a while, and it was very fertile. And a lot of those guys in Berkeley, man, they've all moved to New York since then.
A lot of that had to do with the fact that, what was his name, Hardin, the music teacher?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he really was the springboard for so many great musicians. I've worked with Stephen Bernstein.
Oh yeah.
And Stephen went there. As a matter of fact, Peter actually, I have a company that brings music programs into the New York schools. And Peter actually taught for me. But his hieroglyphics band was great. It was a fabulous band.
It was an amazing band.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot. Yeah, the guy at Berkeley High School, I did a long interview with him for you know, the top, you know, weekly newspaper, The Express, on him, and he was just amazing.
Yeah, a very, very important instructor, for sure, for sure. I want to jump back for a second to the juke joints. In 1990, I picked up a book by Arnold Shaw called Honkers and Shouters. If you know that book.
No, I don't.
It is a compendium of all the great blues and obviously honkers and shouters. And it helped me go back in time, visit a lot of the artists that really were the starting point for so much of the music that we listen to and play now.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, you had Louis Jordan in there. I became a big fan of Louis Jordan because of that book. People like Charles Boaz, who no one really knows, and so many great musicians. And the thing about the juke joints is it also, when you think about Central Avenue in LA, so many of those people gravitated there to actually make some money.
Yeah.
The whole concept of the juke joint was, you know, support the home. Not unlike New York rent parties.
No.
Yeah, and really, it's a great book. I lent it to someone, bought it again, lent it to someone else, and you know that story. But
yeah,
kudos to Arnold.
It's interesting now with so many jazz venues closing and so many places that have music not having jazz. Jazz has gone back to home concerts. I see a lot of jazz artists doing home concerts on the, you know, up here. But David, let's talk about Dan's latest book, The Landfill Chronicles, Unearthing the Legends of Modern Music, that is out on Cymbal Press, yes, and that came out in 2024. We highly recommend that our audience member purchase that book on paperback, hard copy. Jeff Bezos can get your copy on Amazon. Right, and Abby Hoffman says, steal this book, so steal the book. But this book
I actually sold that book back in the day.
Yeah,
I was working at a supermarket in the produce department, and they did have a shelf of magazines and stuff like that, and they had the book, so I just took it and left.
So you actually
Well,
stole
I
the
think
book.
the statute of limitations is over, so I don't think you have to worry.
Well, I don't even have it anymore. I don't know where it went. Somebody stole it from me.
Look, with these gals that want to buy it, most of them are old and dignified. social register types, you know what I mean? They can't be trotting down to Times Square to pick out the merchandise. They gotta have some kind of middleman. And that's where old Daniel comes in, you know what I mean? Hey, I'm walking here! I'm walking here! Up yours, you son of a bitch! You don't talk me that way! Get out of here! Don't worry about that. Actually, that ain't a bad way to pick up insurance, you know.
Dan, this book is every journalist's dream. We all get edited, and we all feel that some of our best work was not afforded the attention it deserved. And we have email folders, and some of us baby boomers have filing cabinets full of story ideas and topics that magazines and publishers passed on. So I'm going to have to guess, you said, well, the hell with that. I'm putting it out myself.
Well, the initial idea of this, and of course, this is a pandemic era project because, as you know, during the pandemic, music wasn't available. I mean, my favorite club in New York, the Jazz Standard, closed.
Yes.
That was it. Musicians were like, they had no money at all. And of course, as a result, journalists who wrote about music for their life, I was without money, no money. There were no gigs. And even like my old editors, like at Billboard and Variety, they were gone. They just disappeared. Yep. Yeah, the one publication that lasted was Downbeat, and it's still alive. But also, given my age, I've been put out to pasture large. I maybe get 2 features a year. That's it. Where I used to do 10, 12 a year when I had one editor who was really great, who was really encouraging to my career. Nevertheless, where was I going on this?
Well, you put it out, you're right, your archives.
Okay. Yeah. So I started thinking in the low period of the pandemic, I started thinking, geez, I wonder if my written material on Frank Zappa, very important interview for me back in the day, I wonder if that's online someplace. And I searched and I never found anything. Of course, it was for Tower Records. You remember Tower Records?
Oh, man, I used to read you all the time in Pulse.
Pulse.
Yeah.
And so they had, back in the day, they had offered me, to go down and visit Frank Zappa and have it be a cover story. Well, of course, Pulse magazine was pre-digital era. So I don't know. I don't think whoever owns Pulse now, I think someplace in New Jersey that could probably care less. It's not digitized. Yeah. And so I searched everywhere for it. And I just thought, God, I've got it right here. I've got my Word docs. I've got photos. I've got everything. And I thought, I'm just going to put it all together because it really deserves to be out there as an archive. This is archival material. And so I started with Frank, and then I started going, God, I've got so many, just looking through the files of my hard drives and stuff, I interviewed a whole lot of people. They were really, I can't say that Frank Zappa was a friend or even he would remember me, probably. That's the way it works.
Right. It should work that way.
You spend time with an artist and you have a conversation, not a Q&A kind of like boring, like, well, right. What's this? What's that? Or when did you start? Kind of like that. That's a writer's homework, is to make sure you have all that down. And then that leads to conversation. So I realized that I had so many conversations with so many important people, and I did a search to see if I could find them. Nothing. And so that's why I call my book The Landfill Chronicles, because all of those stories that I wrote, that I painstakingly wrote, prepped for, and all that stuff, and got out there and got kind of, in a sense, got my name out there too, they no longer exist. They all went, because they're paper products, newspapers and magazines, they all went into the land, forever forgotten. And that's why I call it the Landfill Chronicles. Essentially, I've unearthed at least my stuff. I'm working on volume 2 already. Whether my publisher will publish it or not, I don't know. But it was just like, that's how it started. Frank Zappa started it.
Interesting. It's interesting. We talk about print media, and, most of us lived our lives, well, all three of us lived our lives when publishers and record companies were the gatekeepers, yep. Not only for musicians, which David and I are, and writers were allowed to cover. And in fact, the very job description of being a writer depended on you getting published.
Yeah.
whether it was a major publication on every newsstand in the USA or an indie magazine on the racks of a mom and pop record shop. And I wrote mostly, my career started writing for indie magazines, Brockpile, Amplifier magazine. And, when I saw the title Landfill, and David, you have several print books out, music theory books and things, and that's all on paper. And I said, yeah, my stuff's in a landfill too, with Dan Ouellette. But the thing is I always figure, well, I'm in the scrapbook of all these indie bands I wrote about. So somebody's, grandson is looking through when grandpa was a rocker in the 1980s or 1990s and reading that stuff. But it's interesting now with digital technology, everyone is a writer, everyone is a publisher. All you need is the Wi-Fi and an iPhone. So the industry has pivoted, and a lot of writers of our generation are cursing the dark, but saying that things were better back in the day. In a sense, I feel things are better now because now you can go directly to an audience. For example, David and I both are band leaders of improvisatory jazz experimental groups. And a matter of fact, we play it in your neighborhood, Sylvana and the Shrine and places like that. And David and I would never get signed by a record label.
Yeah.
But now David and I release our music on streaming services.
Yeah.
And we're building an audience and we're getting recognition. Back in the day, with this would not have happened under the old paradigm. And I feel like journalism is going that way as well.
Yeah, I write online. Well, and also, I do a monthly column that's all online that kind of keeps me connected to what's going on in the world. It's called Jazz and Beyond Intel. It's at my website. There was a time back when digital writing first came out and people were doing things, online and stuff like that. They would ask me, "Do you want to contribute to this?" And I'm like, "Well, how much are you going to pay me?" They said, "Well, nothing, but you'll get your name out there." I said, No, that's okay. I've already got my name out there. And I was just really, they saw what was coming and I didn't. That's the best I can say. So yeah, there's lots of opportunities. The big opportunity that, everyone can publish and put stuff out there. They don't have the same thing as actually spending time with someone and having a conversation. They grab a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and put it together, and it makes them sound like, wow, they're like historians. In reality, they're not. They're kind of grabbing stuff here and there.
They're more aggregators than they are.
Yeah. And when I look back at my career, I just went, wow, I had some really, valuable experience learning from these guys, these artists who I just herald. I don't care if they're top of the line like a Wayne Shorter, or if they're, bottom of the line, like a lot of stuff I write about in my Intel column. Yeah, I think it's the expertise, I guess is what I'm saying. There's to a degree I have an expertise in certain kinds of things.
Well, I like your concept about doing a conversation. When Tom and I first started doing this, it was during COVID.
Yeah.
And we started out by interviewing a lot of musicians,
bass
players, because we are bass players.
Huh?
But one of the things that we never did was ask about equipment, what kind of strings you're using, this, that, and the other thing, because one of the keys to the notes from an artist is we like learning. And frankly, we don't really care what kind of bass you use, strings you use, amps you use, or any of that nonsense. We want to get into the concept. So as time went on, these bass players are getting damn boring. And we're talking about people like Benny Reitfeld of Miles Davis's band, Bill Wyman of the Stones, Ron Carter we had on 4 times.
Yeah.
So we started reading books, new books by authors.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was most interesting is how many authors would go, "You actually read the book." I said, "Well, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing?" So that was, and that's what ultimately ended up bringing us to you. And the idea that you call this the Landfill Chronicles is really very humorous.
Totally. You look at the cover of it, it's like, it's got the little bird up there and everything.
Yeah.
But it chases a lot of people away, though. I have to explain it.
Well, if you have to explain it, they shouldn't be reading it. That's my view. But when I look at your, and I made certain to put your table of contents up next door to this particular Zoom,
Yep.
and when I look at the musicians, John Abercrombie, Laurie Anderson, Carla Bley, Ouelette, Elvis Costello, Charlie Hayden, Abdullah Ibrahim, Jared, Elvin Jones, Astor Piazzolla. I said to Tom earlier, most people would think Astor Piazzolla is a kind of Spanish food. Henry Threadgill. These are musicians that are truly not in the mainstream by any stretch of the imagination. Learning their concepts, learning how they thought, how they created, that's basically what our show is about. We want to learn. And all of this works for me. There are a few people on your list that I would, dubious, I understand why you put them in there, but nonetheless, for the most part, this was, an extraordinary group of people. I found Laurie Anderson's Life on a String to be very, very provocative. Really an interesting bit of information. Good stuff.
Yeah, Laurie Anderson ends up as a chapter of her own, because when I was doing the Lou Reed stuff, I was actually at the same time interviewing Laurie Anderson, so I kind of felt like it was a fit. But my editor said, no, she should have a chapter of her own. So who are you dubious about in here?
I don't know if I should really.
No, go ahead.
I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, meaning the musicians, not yours.
Yeah.
Jason Moran, Esperanza Spalding, David Byrne.
See, I like those people. David and I have different tastes.
Edie Bridgewater.
Boo.
I think, listen, I know what you had written was different than what the mainstream writers would write. However, and I'm almost censoring myself because tonight Jim Higgins' book about Lou Reed will be our topic on our radio show. But it seems that Jason Moran, wonderful player, great leader, but he's getting a lot of press. Esperanza gets an awful lot of press.
Oh, I love her. She deserves it too.
Jane, you ignorant slut.
All right, well, that's fine, Tom. But people like Abercrombie and Carla Bley and Ouelette, who too gets a lot of press, Astor Piazzolla, Henry Threadgill, his new book was fantastic. These are people that, personally, I like to hear about. The others,
That's cool. Well, that's the way the book works, is you can read what you want, and the other ones you're not interested just by a glance. But like going back to Dee Bridgewater, I mean, I went to Mali with her. She was doing that record, so I was there while she was working on her record that was tracing back to her history.
Yeah.
Trying to find out what her history was in Africa, and found it in Mali. And so back in when Mali was a safe place to be, I went there and was really kind of a real amazing experience for me. Esperanza, that was like right in the very, very, very beginning of her career. And I'd met her well before her first album. She was playing at Umbria Jazz Festival and spent time with her, and she knows who I am and stuff like that, but not having any much of a connection, but looking at them in kind of like important times in their career. Same with Jason Moran. I'd known him for many years. I'd written bio material for Blue Notes on him, and he became, at that time, a friend of sorts. I can email him now, but whatever. They were just kind of important people to me.
Yeah, no, I get that. As you could hear from the people that I like, I'm much more into the truly cutting-edge avant-gardes. Like Carla Bley, gosh, I remember in 1971 going to Cammie Hall, and I was just a teenager at the time and watching the Jazz Composers Orchestra rehearse. So for me, it's a different thing.
Well, she was an amazing interview that I did up at her house. It was real special, real special. That's one of the things that I take back from these. These are like, special. They're like special things. I'm looking ahead. My next chapters that I'm writing: Bill Frisell, Cassandra Wilson, Nora Jones. I had some really good conversations with Nora Jones when she was just peeking out of the. And so, would I write a story about Nora Jones anyplace now today, because she's become a big star? Probably not. But back in the day, I was there when she was coming up.
Well, the same thing when you talk about Cassandra Wilson. The stuff that she's more renowned for is all great. I don't disagree with that. However, point of view when she was playing with Jean-Paul Borelli and Henry Threadgill. Now the stuff for me.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, that an incredible thing, and I was somewhat surprised when she kind of went mainstream because I thought she had a
Yeah.
career doing what she was doing.
Yeah.
But that's me. It's kind of like when a band gets a hit record, I'm over. I'm done. Because ultimately the next 2 or 3 albums they're chasing that hit versus expanding for the most part. I mean, I would think just on this list alone, the one person that I think changed drastically throughout his whole career is Elvis Costello.
Yeah.
And as much as I love those early albums, I think the album he did with Burt Bacharach may be one of the best albums of all time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the great stories in the book is I didn't know that Elvis Costello's mom worked in Brian Epstein's record store. That was absolutely fascinating.
That was really funny meeting her and her being the biggest fan of this huge Concord Pavilion, jumping up and cheering. She was really something.
Yeah, and she was a real record collector. And so you can see where Elvis got that sense of history from his mom. Had no idea about that. And I read Elvis Costello's autobiography, and I don't recall him really going into his family that much. I know his dad was a performer, but you say in your preface that there's a proliferation of junk on our planet. Hence the landfill. My apartment, when I was a reviewer back then, not only did I have piles of Pulse magazine, but you remember getting about 350 CDs in the mail.
Oh yeah,
every month. And a lot of what I reviewed, unfortunately or fortunately, was based on advertising dollars. The record companies that advertised with my magazine, those were the guys who got first choice.
Yeah.
And I used to play a little game before I threw out my 350 CDs, or before I took out the good ones that I could sell at on St. Mark's Place. There, Sounds, right? I cashed those in and would get like the my Miles Davis deluxe editions and things like that. I'd always put the CD in the turntable, or the carousel, I should say. And I go, wow, this is a great album. These guys are really, really good. If only they spent some money on advertising, I would get to review them. Yeah. And then I take the CD and throw it in the garbage. And sometimes I would meet these people and they would say, hey, did you get my CD? I said, yeah, it was really, really good. We recorded at Abbey Road and we spent $50,000 on mastering. I said, what was your advertising budget? And they go, well, we have a friend that, there was a guy who works for.
Yeah.
It's like, man, that's what your career depends on. So a lot of what you and I and David got to review and write about started off in the ad department, started off in the marketing department.
Oh, yeah.
So I think
I was different than you guys. I never was, quote unquote, a writer. My introduction to writing happened because I was performing, meaning I was at a club one night playing, and the woman who edited a magazine in Long Island called The Music Paper came up to me and asked me if I liked the job that the bass instructor who was writing a column was writing. And I said, no, it sucks. And she goes, yeah, I agree. Would you like to write for us? That would happen. And literally 2 months later, a friend of mine came up to me and said, I'm editing music books. You want to write a bass book? And I went, sure. And now there's 18 bass books out by me. So I became a writer by proxy. It wasn't even in my concept of what I would end up doing with my life.
We talk about the importance that rock journalism and music journalism has. I mean, if I read something that Dan wrote about in Pulse, well, I was going to invest my record money in that record. And I had the experience. I was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame about 10 years ago. And under glass.
I'm a member of it, just visiting it.
No, I have to buy a ticket. None of my bands got in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And there was a letter by Pete Townsend written to the editor of Rolling Stone or something, because Quadrophenia only got 3.5 stars. And it's a 10-page letter, beautifully handwritten under glass. And it just showed you how important journalism was, because that was the only way we knew whether or not we were going to invest our money in this record.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit different now, although word of mouth and what we get now that's been replaced by playlists.
Yep.
So now that Spotify knows what I like to listen to. If I like Bill Laswell and Jah Wobble, it's going to turn me on to similar artists like that. What are your thoughts on the role that how is rock journalism or music journalism in general pivoting to accommodate 21st century technology?
Well, everything is digital now. And I did at a certain point, I put up some playlists on Spotify for a chapter. I can't remember. I think it was for my column chapter. And I would make a playlist. I don't know how many people looked at it or cared about it, and then I just thought, that's a lot of work to do that. I see Spotify as kind of being like a calling card for most artists. Their calling card, they get a lot of hits, and then they'll get concerts that'll pay some money. I don't know. I'm just I'm looking for people who are not straight ahead down the road. That's the kind of stuff I like writing about now. And that's why my Intel column, I've been doing it for 6 years now, and I just have a whole lot of people that people have never heard of, and so it's kind of an educational basis for me now. Obviously, there's no money in it, but what I used to do all my writing for, I made a lot, I had a lot of good gigs for a lot of different magazines, and I had like a clientele of like 15 different people or organizations. I don't know. That's all gone away, and that's fine. So I can go back. I can go back and look at my old stuff. My interview with Charlie Watts. That's going to be in volume 2 of Landfill.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
With Jim Keltner. When Charlie Watts and Jim Keltner did an album together, and I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with them in a hotel room. And there's Charlie Watts. I mean, he's a big clothes. He was a big clothes guy.
Oh, very dapper.
Yeah,
gentleman.
very. Yeah, and then
And if
you
you-
see him on stage with the Rolling Stones. He's got a T-shirt on, but go out in public, man. And Jim Keltner was like a really great part of that interview. The exchange they had with each other.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it, but David and I did a whole show with Ron Carter on how to dress for a gig, because Ron has his own brand of neckties and pocket handkerchiefs. And yeah, Ron was great. He was going. Remember, David? He was going in and out of his closet, showing us what he wore.
Shoes and things.
So,
Well, here, have you seen this?
yeah. Oh, there you go.
That's my book.
Wow. Was that David? Was that the book?
Yeah,
I think
the book.
that's the
he
book.
gave us.
Now here's thank goodness I read your book. I didn't realize you wrote that book. On the eve of us interviewing Ron. Now we were told that Ron's a very fickle character.
Yeah.
And then I think, David, you had sent me a copy of the book.
Yeah, because
I read it. I read the whole. You sent a PDF, and I read the book the day before we interviewed Ron. It's a damn good thing I did, because man, if you hadn't warned me, Dan, I'd have stepped on a lot of landmines.
He gave me some great stories.
That's a fabulous book. Yeah, reading your book on the eve of talking to him, it was a godsend. Among my interview heroes were Timothy White. I really love the work he did at Billboard. Nice man. Gary Giddens. You read Gary Giddens, and it's like going to college. David and I are big fans of Dick Cavett. We love listening to Dick Cavett's audiobooks. Hope to get him on the show. And I enjoyed Johnny Carson's interviews. Bob Costas, I think, is a great interviewer. Howard Stern can be a pretty good interviewer. David Susskind was another favorite of mine. Who are some of your interview journalists that you look up to?
Oh, journalists that I look up to? I'm a fan of Bill Milkowski, although he's kind of like, he was one of the people who was not happy to see a Californian come to New York. But we've had a relationship since then. I'm trying to think. I have a friend. His name is David Brown. He writes for Rolling Stone. He just out the book Talking Greenwich Village. He's a personal friend, and I've got his book there, and I gotta say, it's just harder and harder for me to read. I'm too much on my screen. David Brown.
You wonder, a lot of our journalism, our work has wound up in a landfill. Some journalism, isn't it, should be of its time. I remember reading years ago when I was a teenager, reading Elton John's, an interview Elton John did in Rolling Stone in 1973. Remember when Rolling Stone didn't have staples and it would fold over and things? And he referred to his music as disposable pop. And I think Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was the record that came out. And he was like, well, nobody will care about this in a few years. And there's something about the baby boomer generation, which we're all members of, that we love to cling on to our culture.
Yeah.
Is that part of the influence of archiving things on your part?
Well, yeah, to a degree, but historically, I mean, the stuff that I put here, there's a history to it. I'm not kind of wishing I was still a baby boomer, but that was kind of like how I came up. I never interviewed one of the Beatles, and they were my favorites. So, and to this day, do I want to interview Paul McCartney? Probably not. Yeah, I just want to kind of go to the depths of my own personal archives and just put it out there for what it's worth.
Who are some of the artists that are going to be in the new one?
Let me see. I've got it written down here someplace. Well, it'll be that Charlie Watts, Jim Keltner.
Was that when they didn't he do a big band record? Is that what the one?
No, that was before that. They did.
Okay.
It was kind of an experimental project of some sort.
Interesting.
Also, Abby Lincoln. I've
Oh.
done Abby Lincoln, which is kind of cool. I'm looking through my notes here. What's his name? Hold on one sec. I'm looking through my notes, which are not very well organized here.
Take your time.
Yeah, oh yeah. I don't know. Time is burning. I'll look at another calendar. See, what I also did too was all the chapters I wrote until out of the blue, the owner of Cymbal Press offered me to, put them all together. Was on that writers platform called Medium.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So everything is archived there. Jim Hall?
Jim Hall.
Oh, that should be great. Speaking of Ron Carter, probably one of the best records Jim Hall did was Alone Together. The first one, not the second one.
Yeah. I have a blindfold test with Kenny Barron and Mulgrew Miller.
Oh man, I enjoyed the one you did with Freddie Hubbard.
Oh, Freddie, that's a classic.
That was a great one, and I liked Carla Bley.
There's a cassette tape, Tom, of Freddie Hubbard in Germany, which is not too flattering, but wow, it gets right to the heart.
And then, of course, we learned that Carla Bley's secret with men, David, is to give them gigs. That's how you hold on to a man.
Steve Swallow.
Tell my wife that.
She does give you gigs, David.
That's right. They're just not playing one. Go paint the house.
Jimmy Heath.
Okay. Oh, great. Fabulous. Well, it's I admire the fact that you refer to your interviews as conversations, because so many times now, especially in journalism, it's more about inflicting your opinions on rather than letting the artists tell the story themselves.
Yeah, I want them to tell their stories, really. That's the bottom line to it.
Yeah, it's telling stories.
I found the list.
Okay, go ahead.
With Jimmy Heath, Jim Hall. I did a section on Tracy Chapman. After the Grammys, I had interviewed her a long time ago, and I forgot about it, and I found it in my archives. Pat Metheny.
Okay.
Cedar Walton. James Carter, Horace Silver.
Oh, all right.
They're and if you can go to Medium, to my site, which is danouellette.medium.com, and just do a search for other things.
Great. Oh, James Carter, his career is so diverse.
Yeah, it is. And I was, again, it's like these points in time where I documented it or wrote about it and got paid for it, where he was kind of like cantankerous. And it was like this big controversy between him trying to steal what's his name's girlfriend and all. It's weird. But I think he's just back in Cleveland or Detroit.
Detroit, I think it is.
Yeah, he's just gone back home. So, and he shows up here every now and then. I'm going to do upcoming chapters are going to be on Joe Lovano, of course. I have a lot of time with him. I'm even thinking of I've got an interview with Alison Krauss when she was 18 years old. That's a long time ago, when she was a reluctant singer. She was a great violin player, and that's what really attracted me to her. But then that all turned. I'm wondering about that. T-Bone Burnett, I have a lot of stuff on him. That's upcoming. I don't know. So it's going to be part jazz and it's going to be part roots music or, Americana.
Sounds like a good one.
Excellent. Well, thanks for being on the show.
We have to have you on a show when it comes out.
Yeah, when the next Chronicles, they'll let us know when that comes out. We'd love to have you back on. And aside from Chronicles 2, Dan, what's on your bucket list? What do you have to do? What do you have to do before you leave this mortal coil?
I keep writing for I'm on Shelter Island, which is the South Fork of Long Island is put on a jazz festival called the Hamptons Jazz Festival.
Okay.
And they're in their 5th year. And I write a lot. If there's somebody's coming through town I want to write about, I'll do it for a print magazine for $150. And, that's what I'm doing. And then I have some bios coming up. I write, musician bios.
Okay.
And I'm hoping to go back to Heidelberg in October to that jazz festival. I went there last year and it was really, really great.
David, $150. That's more than we get at what do we get? What do we make? $100 a night?
What you gig?
Yeah. David and I go on about the fact that musicians' fees haven't changed in the last 50 years.
I know.
Oh, it's funny though that
We should become writers, David. We'll make more money.
People with $30,000 cars and $75,000 worth of equipment drive to a gig where they get $30.
Well, that's going deep in the hole, man.
Tell me about it.
Exactly. Well, hey Dan, great to meet you. Great talking with you.
Yeah, it's really great talking to you.
Yes,
you guys are great. You're very easy interview and very. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Oh well, yes. No
Thank
gossip.
you.
No. Yes, really. We'll leave that up to Access Hollywood, David.
That's it.
And will there be a link to this?
Yes. Oh, we're going to break the internet like the Kardashians. We will. Yes, they'll be on the radio, and then it'll be on our podcast.
What radio?
It's on Cygnus Radio, which is an internet radio station. We'll send you all the links.
Send me all that stuff because then what I'll do is what I've been doing with my book and my column. I just try to do as much social media as possible.
Well, you live a very lavish lifestyle, so we have to keep that up. I know you do all the red carpets and all that.
I wouldn't have the clothes for that, man. I'm a jeans guy.
The cement carpet. Anyway, hey, Dan, great. Thanks for talking. And I will shoot you an email in a couple of weeks. All this stuff will come out.
Much appreciated.
All right.
You guys.
Be well. Keep writing.
Take care. Good meeting you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
good meeting you too. Bye-bye.
Oh. All right. That was Dan Ouellette. Great guest. Thank you, Dan, for being brave enough. Come on, Notes from an Artist. David, let's talk about the Dan Ouellette playlist.
Well, one of the things that makes this playlist different, why is this playlist different from most other playlists? Manish Tana. Well, the reason is it's not an artist. It's an author, and he wrote a book about other artists. So I was able to pick and choose from a panoply of artists. Yes, a panoply.
A string of polo poems.
Which isn't that in Maryland, right near Annapolis?
Peloponnese? Yes, Annapolis. Annapolis Penelope.
Yes. So we have a lot of interesting things. We have Oh Superman by Laurie Anderson, Lawns by Carla Bley. And one of the nice things about radio is I can put long tunes in. So not only did I put Ornette Coleman's theme from Symphony No. 1, I had the forethought and the afterthought and no thought at all about putting theme from a Symphony No. 2 in there. We have Elvis Costello. Now, most of you would think, oh, Elvis Costello, it must be, from My Aim Is True or Armed Forces or something like that. But no, not at all.
No.
One of my favorite Elvis Costello records is the one he did with Burt Bacharach. And our friend Chris Parker played drums on that. So we're doing God Gives Me Strength, which is an incredible tune, and Elvis does a great job. Then, to round out the bass player version of ourselves, we have Charlie Hayden's Alone Together. Danny Boy by Keith Jarrett. Joni Mitchell does Coyote. Lou Reed's Brandenburg Gate, because no one would think, why would you do the song with Metallica? Well, it's good. We're doing a Henry Threadgill tune, which I've been a fan of Threadgill for 1,000,001 years, a tune called Bermuda Blues. And we end the set with one of Nancy's favorite tunes, Montana by Frank Zappa.
Oh, yeah, going to Montana.
Yes, this is where we get our dental floss from.
Exactly. Well, once again, thanks for listening, folks. My name is Tom Semioli. Keep your feet on the ground and reach for the stars. David?
Well, I'm David C. Gross, and we want to thank Dan Ouellette for being on our show. I know it took a little longer to get this one out, but you be the judge. Was it worth it?
Yes, it was well worth a listen, and do check out the Landfill Chronicles, Unearthing the Legends of Modern Music, and I'm sure you and I will be in the next volume of that.
That's right. We'll be in the landfill.
We will.
And we will be chronicled there.
Yes. All right, David, let's go bury ourselves. Good night, everybody.
Goodbye.
Mrs. Schwartz?
Oh,
Excuse me, Mrs. Schwartz. Could you tell us how you feel about oil heat?
oil heat? Oh, well, I think oil heat is wonderful. See, I'm showering in the delightful hot water. All I want, all I can use. And I know for a fact that only oil heat can give me so much, so fast, and it's so dependable. And I got my dishwasher going, my washer going. Still plenty of hot water. Whoops, I dropped myself. You know, everybody, all my friends wouldn't think of buying a house unless it was heated by oil. Oh, everybody thinks it's so dependable. Dependable hot water and dependable comfortable heating in every room in my house.
Mrs. Schwartz?
Yeah?
You know you're on television?
Yes, I know.
Oil heat. You can depend on it.
In the criminal justice system, sexually based offenses are considered especially heinous. In New York City, the dedicated detectives who investigate these vicious felonies are members of an elite squad known as the Special Victims Unit. These are their stories.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Unforeseen circumstances, this show will remain on the air until further notice.